Hey, my name is Esther Goldstein, and I am an anxiety and trauma therapist. And there's a question that's come up pretty frequently in the past couple of weeks, and I wanted to talk about it. So, the question is, if therapy helps people, why do some people resist it? Or you might have the question of, if therapy is helping me, why did I push it off for so long? Or if there's someone in my life who I think that counseling or therapy or help could help them, why are they fighting it so much? So, I have to share with you a little bit from my own personal experience and from my professional input. Many times, when it comes to reaching out for help, we look at a problem, right? So, you have a backache, go to a back doctor. If you have a bellyache, go to a belly doctor. But the thing that comes up with counseling that's a little different, or very different, I should say, is that half of the awareness is acknowledging the emotional reality of your life. It's an emotional feat, it's an emotional task, and it requires a high level of capacity, awareness, being honest and truthful, and challenging some of your defensive structures. Let me give you an example. I have a couple of friends who, when I became a therapist over a decade ago, they thought it was really cool. They were like, wow, you're this strong person, you're going to help people. Um, and they were really excited about it. But as the years went on and I engaged in being a therapist, but also I engaged in my own therapy, and I was doing my own work, some of them kind of grimaced at the idea when I said, hey, it's really important to be aware of your own journey. I don't think everyone needs to be in therapy, but I'm really finding being in this field eye-opening. I'm finding it really life-changing to really, get to know, who I am and what I am and what makes me tick and how I can deepen who I am, because this is also the kind of work that I'm offering my clients. And some of my friends were like fascinated and excited, and some people almost had this resistance. Now, fast forward over a decade later, I have some of the same friends who have done their own introspective work or have engaged in really meaningful conversations. And I have one or two friends who recently had a conversation with me and said, years ago when you mentioned the concept of therapy, I had a really strong reaction because I just thought, like, I don't want to be nuts or I don't want to go digging. But like now I'm noticing, in my marriage or with my children, or I don't know, something came up and I'm realizing like there really are things that maybe need attention. And I had a few conversations recently, either with friends or even with clients who I've spoken to who said, I'm so mad at myself that I didn't reach out for therapy or that I didn't, speak to someone 5 years ago. And what I often encourage the person at that point in time is, could we just look at the reasons of why you didn't? Right? Like if we didn't do something sooner, it's because we had a good reason, right? If somebody didn't come to counseling 5 years earlier, or if the friend of mine didn't want to actually like have a more honest conversation about her life or her struggles or her hopes or her dreams or the things she was grieving, there must have been a really good reason. And I would really, I would almost like meet that with curiosity and respect. Like, wow, okay, your marriage was in a tricky place, but you really needed to keep things like tight, keep a tight lid so you guys would be okay. That makes so much sense, right? And now that your kids are older, you have more capacity, right? Or, there's this piece with your workplace and you really didn't want to look at it, or it wouldn't have helped if you looked at it sooner because it would have just made you more angry and you needed to hold on to that job for the next couple of years. Or you didn't have the emotional resourcefulness or the capacity to, notice that you're grieving, the body size that you always wished you had, but your body just is shaped differently, or the way that you are is different, or whatever it might be, right? Like there's so many big or small things. So I just want to say, first of all, I don't think everyone needs to be in therapy. I'm speaking specifically to people who counseling has been helpful for, or they started therapy, or you started therapy and you wish that you came sooner, or you have someone in your life who's really struggling or they're pushing against it, and in your mind you're just confused because you don't understand why they would do that. So I just want to say that there's often many reasons. Okay, so like I just said, there's a few of those reasons that I mentioned, but it could also be that reaching out for therapy, when somebody reaches out, it means that they've acknowledged that there's something that's painful. They've acknowledged that there's some kind of like hurt, or there's some kind of boo-boo, or there's some kind of something, and they won't need help with it. And that's quite terrifying, like especially for us in today's world. Like we got to be strong and buff and like we can do this thing on our own, and coming to terms with the fact of like, I think there's something that I kind of need help with and I have to hire someone or I have to reach out to someone beyond me is very scary for two reasons. Number one, I'm acknowledging that there's a problem, and the problem might be really frightening and uncomfortable for me to hold because I don't yet have a solution, right? Like being in the space of here's this question is uncomfortable. Obviously, this is half of resolving it, right? Acknowledging and getting really clear on the problem. I know, like at our practice, when we do really good anxiety, trauma, and relationship healing and abandonment healing, we identify specifics of what does it mean to you? How does it impact your life? And then we offer healing to that specific wound, right? We're not just generically doing healing. So coming up with understanding that issue is like just being able to tolerate that discomfort. And the second piece is, say I take this piece to someone, how do I know the person can help me? I mean, you might know as much as I do, and I wonder if you're like this, but I know for my own self, sometimes my biggest like hesitation to reaching out for help or to sharing a vulnerability is my fear of like, I know what it is, but it's so frightening to share. And the fear is like, if it's not met or if it's not understood, it makes me want to crawl back into the cave and never have shared, right? So with therapy, it's like, let's say you identify the problem and you reach out to a therapist or a mentor or whoever, and they don't get it or they judge you. That's a horrible feeling. So it's scary because here's the problem and I don't have an answer yet, or I don't have the right kind of way to navigate it. And number two is, how do I know I'm going to get the right support? Those are the two main aspects that I see. Okay. And so if you know someone who's struggling, or if you just want to understand why people do that, right? It's because it's incredibly scary or frightening or unknown. And they also might be really worried. And the best thing you can possibly do is offer support, and to almost like, instead of challenging or pushing someone, I would almost be like, what's really good about not going? Or, yeah, I can see that you have this struggle. I have some ideas and I'm wondering, like, what is it that you're looking for? Or what would help you feel calmer if you were to reach out to this mentor or this, therapist or whoever to get the right kind of healing? And I would offer, some input, and the person might not go to counseling for a while. I know there have been times when people are living in survival, or they just don't have the resourcefulness and it's just not the right time mentally. And I really think it's important to honor that. I've seen people in my professional practice, and when they say, I couldn't come sooner, I actually feel like it would have been a good clinical choice. Like if I would have met them, I almost would have said, come back in a couple of years. Sometimes people are just not ready, or it's just not the right time, or they're just not in the right headspace. Or sometimes, it's almost like asking a child to process a trauma when the child just needs support, and only when they're later and they're out of the danger zone could they really process it, right, with the right brain capacities and support. So I just want to name that, like, if there's you who wants to push someone to get help, or you wish that you got help sooner, kind of just acknowledging that sometimes we can't push things. But if there is someone who you think could be receptive, I think I would also just like educate and hear about their worries and hear about their fears, and maybe just educate them on, like, if you go to a therapist, if you acknowledge there's a problem, it doesn't mean that you're suddenly identifying that there's a monster in the room. Most of the time you already know, right? Like, people are so worried about saying, well, this is really bothering me, because they feel like now they're suddenly gonna, awaken the tiger, or, open up Pandora's box. And what I often say, or what I would encourage you to say is, I wonder, like, I know part of you, or I know some part of you is worried about talking about this, or looking at your marriage or your job or whatever, right? Your family of origin, or your relationship dynamics. And I wonder if, like, is it something new you would find, or is it paying attention to something that is already weighing heavy on you? Because so many times people have this sense of like, if I don't look at it, it's not weighing on me. Most of the time, what I've noticed, and I noticed even for myself, is like when people say I don't want to look at it, to me, it's almost like, well, you're already looking at it, aren't you? And it's really heavy on you, isn't it? And I wonder if there was a way for us to help it be just a little lighter on your heart and on your mind. And my hope is that if we find the right person in your life to help you hold that, it's actually going to feel a little lighter. Because if we're talking about it, my sense is that some part of you knows that it's there, right? Like, usually if we're struggling or pushing it away, they were extending a lot of energy on even managing that, right? It's not like asleep, because if it was asleep, we wouldn't be having any symptoms or annoyances, right? So a lot of times when people say that, it's like, is it really something new, or is it something that you're kind of managing, but it's actually tiring and you're just worried it's not going to get any better, right? You're used to the old coping. All right, this is like with people who are drinking alcohol, or who are avoidant, who keep getting into emotionally unavailable relationships, or perpetuate unhealthy family patterns, right? Like, sometimes we look at this in a really curious way, and also we offer them some insight of what they really think is working and, what might actually help more. And the second piece is about education. Like, you can meet a therapist, or you could reach out to a mentor, or, someone in a role where you trust, or a trusted friend, and you can share like just a little snippet and test the waters to see if this person is someone who you feel comfortable sharing with, or a therapist you want to work with. Like, you don't ever have any commitment. You could open up, or you can share, and then you could close the box down. Like, you really want to honor the person's autonomy. Or if this is for you, like, I want you to honor your autonomy. If you can take a step forward, and you could take 3 steps back and never open it again. Or you could take a step forward and another step forward and decide, do I want to continue, and then take it from there. So I think just like honoring the emotions, almost like lovingly challenging their belief around how they're managing the problem, and also giving a lot of education and, reminding them of the autonomy that they have. I think one of the biggest pieces why I'm even having this conversation and putting this video out is that I have seen that for people who, even if they were frightened or worried or unsure, but they were ready, right? Not people who it wasn't the right time, but they were ready and they got the right help for their marriage, for healing abandonment wounds, working through emotional neglect, or, healing from anxiety or trauma or whatever it is. I've seen such beautiful healing happen, and I've seen people's lives just shift so much. And so I'm hopping on here if like you're not sure if you should do this therapy thing, or if you have someone in your life. I'm just putting this out there because I really believe in psychotherapy and how it heals. As a somatic therapist, as an IFS therapist, as an EMDR therapist, right? I'm trained in many methods. I've truly seen how really good trauma-informed healing can really help people's minds and bodies heal, so they get sick a lot less often and they just have more rich, loving lives. So that's my little tidbit. My name is Esther Goldstein. If you want to check out any resources on our website is www.integrativepsych.co. It's linked below. We've got lots of free resources. We're located in New York, and even if you're not in New York, you can reach out to us, and we would be more than happy to help connect you to a clinician who is trauma-informed in your area. I'm really devoted to healing. I hope you can offer yourself that gift, and I hope you take care of yourself.